Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Rebecca Rose, Series Blue, and we are speaking with Eric Hecker today, friend, colleague, and fellow Alaskan. I always think of you, Eric, as the Antarctica guy. I'm really happy you're here. We are friends off camera, and I'm really delighted to have you on my channel and chat about some uh, esoteric topics in a variety of ways. So, and I think we're both in the state of Alaska right now. That's exciting. I know you've been on the Alaska Triangle show. I was just down camping near Mount Hayes for about 10
Mhm.
days. That was interesting. Purported ET base within that, that monolith within the Alaska range. So we'll come back to the Alaska Triangle, I think, a little later.
You got
I
it.
want to, I'm introducing you a little bit more formally here, I would say. You were born and raised on Long Island. Yeah. Uh, Close to Montauk, if anyone is unfamiliar with that. Yeah. And as a child, part of the Stargate program, and then later spent a short time in the Submarine Service, where you came across a peculiar program run by Raytheon. I also want to come back to that. In November of 2010, Eric was selected to be part of the U.S. Antarctic program, spent an entire year at South Pole Station, where he learned things were not as they seemed. And hence this whole many years later, that began and catalyzed this almost snowball effect of you propelling yourself into the public eye to disclose truths that not many people can know about, because frankly, how many people go to Antarctica? Out of sight, out of mind, as we know, with things that were going on. In my case, for example, on Mars, and on and on. So I think how many years have you been chatting about particularly the Antarctica material and the neutrino
Geez,
detector?
I
Has it
guess I've
been?
been speaking maybe 5 years-ish.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Mm.
You've really had to, I think all of us as whistleblowers of one sense or another have to kind of go through a series of little internal hoops to get to where we are. And you've really
Mhm.
been I want to say warrior-like in your capacity to withstand a lot of blows from the community, and also to keep, getting your information to the public, regardless of what it takes and regardless of how it makes you look to others here and there. So I'm curious about, there's so many things right at once here. I'm curious, could you speak to that peculiar program that you discovered run by Raytheon while you were in the submarine service? Is that a branch of the US military?
Yes, the submarine service is part of the
Subservice.
Navy. It's just
Okay.
a department of the Navy.
Mhm.
And I guess long story short, I found myself I was 18 years old in the submarine service,
Yeah.
and I was learning that things weren't necessarily as they seemed, as presented by the Navy. And as an 18-year-old, I was in one of those situations where, here I was in the Navy, but I had a girl, and things weren't really working out. And I started to consider that maybe the Navy wasn't necessarily the best thing for me. Well, it's not very easy to get out of a 6-year contract with the United States Navy, so I wound up having I guess the best way I can put it is a Raytheon employee was put in my direction. He extended an offer to me that if I would basically join him in a program that he was working, that he could get me out of the submarine service scot-free. And I agreed. I mean,
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
18. Maybe it was the stupidest thing I ever did, but
That's what we're supposed to do when we're 18.
yeah.
Right?
So I took him up on his offer, and he asked me to meet him in, I guess you'd say, his laboratory, which was in the basement level of Building 518, which was a very top secret facility that I was undergoing training in to begin with. So I had access to this facility. I met him in the basement. I went to the door of his office. He opened the door. I remember walking in, and when you go to the emergency room and they have like the curtains that wrap around the gurney, but they're
Yeah.
attached to like a rail on the
Yes.
ceiling.
Yeah.
There was one of those, and it had like a brown curtain. And he pulled the curtain back, and there was a dentist type looking chair inside the curtain area that had wiring and stuff to it. And in hindsight, I would say it must be what people refer to as a Montauk type chair. Um,
Mm,
my recollections kind of end at that point of approaching the chair.
hmm.
But I know I went there willingly. I
Yeah.
know I was moving towards the chair, and I know I got out of the Navy scot-free like he offered. So
Yeah.
that was that was
So and so it's like this, it sounds like a block of like when do you come back into the story of your life after, okay, I'm seeing the chair, there's the curtain, there's the guy, and then what?
well,
Do you
it's very something I can't really answer that question.
yeah.
My time in the submarine service was extremely peculiar, challenging, and then there was yet even an other instance of where I know that I lost 20 minutes of time, and that occurred after this event, where I was at the New London train station over in Connecticut.
Yeah.
I was going home for a Liberty weekend, and I was approached by a much older gentleman who identified himself as the executive officer of the USS Groton, a Navy submarine. I knew this man was lying immediately because of his age. He was way too old to be a crew member of a submarine. They're a very young crew. So I knew this person was lying, and I proceeded with caution. And my father used to refer to me as a habitual line stepper. So I proceeded to step lines with this gentleman. I didn't disengage. He started asking me a whole bunch of questions that I had already been trained, you know, how to answer appropriately because, this would be the line of questioning of acts of espionage. So this
Hmm.
person was asking very peculiar questions. I continued to, I guess you would say, banter with this person. Got to the point where he invited me into like a bodega, like a crappy
Yeah.
little deli,
Yeah.
and he offered to buy me a beer. I informed him that I was underage because at this point I'm like, oh, maybe this is just a trap to see if they can get me to drink underage and get me in trouble. I informed him that I was underage. He informed me that he didn't care, and I stepped the line a little bit further. He bought me a beer. We walked around. We kept BSing about you know I guess you would say like top secret topics, but I was being evasive as he was attempting to engage. And then eventually, I had to get back to the train station to catch my train. He offered a cab ride to get back to the train station. When I entered the cab, I had looked at my watch, and I would say we were, you know, maybe 5 minutes away from the train station. And when we had actually pulled back up to the curb at the train station, I looked at my watch again, and I had completely lost 20 minutes of time. You know, time had passed fast. Whatever you want to call it. It was 20 minutes later than it should have been,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
made zero sense. It completely freaked me out. I exited the taxi,
Mm.
and that added again to the peculiar time period for which I was stationed on the submarine base.
Definitely, for sure. So, and one of the points I wanted to make, and like a question I've had internally that you have answered, is you were onto the world of high strange well before 2010 when you got to Antarctica. I think you were really turned on to that before that point, well before that point, because we're talking about your 18, 17, 18, back in the submarine service. And
Mhm.
prior to that, you have memory of being in psychic experiments as a kid, I believe. So
Absolutely.
let's do can we go into for people who don't know
Absolutely.
Stargate the Stargate project, I believe, you tell me if this is right, I think it was the 70s through the 90s according to official data, blah blah
Mhm.
blah blah blah, but the headliner, the signature Stargate program existed in that time to bring psychic ability to the US military intelligence. Is that correct?
I would agree 100% with that.
Yeah. And so, and here you are, a kid on Long Island of all places, so
Mhm.
synonymous in my mind with Montauk, which is rather frightening. But that's my subjective, view there. And what is your memory set of that? I mean, where does that begin? Where does the element? I'm trying to trace back Eric Hecker's
Mhm.
timeline to where the weirdness begins. And I think it's probably from day one, as was it for me. So it's sort of like chasing a tail here. But
Yeah,
yeah, what do you recall, and at what age, was this testing
I
going on?
I would say that my memories on this stuff go back as far as I can remember.
Yeah,
So it's very challenging to say when was the first one,
yeah.
because they just seemed like, as far back as I can recall, there were folks messing with me. I actually scored a song lyric from a former band from New York, which I think is appropriate to folks like me in these programs, and the lyric is "From the womb to the tomb."
Mm-hmm.
So to the best of my recollection, I've been attended to in some way, shape, or form. One of the things that I discovered that's very interesting, and I don't believe coincidental in the slightest, is one of the reasons the US government was very interested in remote viewing was they had on their to-do list, they believed that there was a way to utilize remote viewing and remote viewers to provide a alternative means of communications with submariners.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, they were considering that, it's very challenging to communicate with a submarine crew and maintain secrecy. So they turned towards remote viewing as a possible means to get that conduit of communication connected. So there's, questionable things about my past and then where I went to eventually. And when, one does research on these things, it's very jaw dropping when you when you realize that you're living the life of all these peculiar programs. But I can't separate myself from the possibility that maybe that's a reason I was tapped as a child,
Yeah.
and potentially guided in a particular direction.
Absolutely. Well, and for myself, working in the field that I do with the Akashic records and looking at the journey of the soul, and I'm like, well, that's all over your template of like I came in and it was kind of weird from the beginning, the middle, and then on into the next chapters. It was just weird from start to finish.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so were you in the gifted program at all, Eric?
absolutely,
That
yeah.
was
And
that was it.
whether you
Was
want to
that
call it the tag program, gate program, whatever
yeah.
the term they use.
So and what do you remember happen? Was there weirdness happening within that place? Within that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was one of the most weirdest times of my life, because it was so counterintuitive to everything else going on in my world. Like, I grew up in a very old-fashioned, you'd almost say like a World War II community, a lot of veterans, old school Catholic school. There's right and there's wrong, and if it's wrong, you're getting whacked in the head
Hmm.
until you figure out how to make it right again. But
Yeah.
when I would get pulled out of class to go to the library in my school for the gifted program, um, I in my brain I thought of it as Bizarro World. I don't know if you ever watched the Superman show, and there was Bizarro Superman, where everything was
Mm.
like weird and off. He was Superman, but he wasn't Superman. They called him Bizarro, right? So I thought of the library as Bizarro World, because if I was in the classroom, there's right and there's wrong. If I was in the library, right, I now know, having done research, that we were going through the protocols for the Robert Monroe Institute's remote viewing program.
Hmm.
But at the time when I was a kid, they were not being straightforward with me. They were lying to us about everything,
Of course,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So we would sit down to do the remote viewing protocols, and part of it was like, the ideogram, where you draw a line on the page,
Yes.
and
Yes.
they would ask you questions,
Yeah.
and you move your pen or pencil to a spot on the line, and they ask you a question. So, as an example, they would say, do you currently see water, or do you see mountains? And this,
Right.
I
Right.
mean, it made no sense to me. Again, they were lying. I didn't really at the time know what that meant. Like, what do you mean? What do I see? I see a line and a pencil, lady.
Right.
But regardless, they would ask the question, and I would start to think, and then they would tell me, don't think, just answer the question. Whatever you say is right. And
Hmm.
that blew my mind, because it was like, what do you mean whatever I say is right? How can I always be right? Like, there's a right and so it just, it was bizarre to
That
me,
was
you know.
probably really confusing. Yeah. And
It
for
was super
people who
confusing.
are who are unfamiliar, that ideogram is how the military works its remote viewers, is drawing a little squiggle and you get paraphernalia information and so on from that squiggle. So I'm in brief shorthand just to explain that.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. And then yeah,
so
so that was one of the ways that to me it made no sense, you know. And then additionally, you know, when we walked in, I mean, normally there was these massive windows that were drawn shut, and it was the only time I would ever see them drawn shut was when we were brought in um, for that program. And I have found from researching it that that is exactly how this program worked. They always made sure that you couldn't see outside, that the room was dark. Um, the nun, the librarian that ran that library with an iron fist, um, was present, right? But the bizarre part was it was almost like she was like sitting behind the desk area that she, you know, normally is standing up on the counter and observing all the children and, you know, hitting people with yardsticks. But instead of being at the counter in her, you know, duty position, she was just sitting on a stool, like tucked over in the corner, like hunched down, hands on her lap, almost like someone had shut her down.
like she was under a spell,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It was like you would walk in and she was just sitting there doing nothing, silent, and like someone turned her off. And she didn't make a peep. And then we were being, I guess you would say,
Yeah.
handled
Yeah.
by people that had nothing to do with the school. I'd never seen them in my life.
Right. Oh gosh. And was this Eric, was this wasn't Catholic school or was it public school?
It was Catholic school.
Okay. All right. And about how many kids do you remember being with? How many?
I would I would ballpark that there was probably maybe maybe somewhere between 8 and 12 kids.
Yeah. Yeah. They keep them pretty small groups, so we're
Yeah.
much more manageable. And do you remember, do
Hmm.
you have a sense of the, like, was this for a season or many, or do you know? I know sometimes
This
it's
was
hard
for
to,
years.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
was for years. Hmm.
Uh-huh. And did you progress to like where you were doing well and they wanted to take you elsewhere, or where does this memory
Oh,
feed lead you later?
they always gave I guess you would say like rave reviews, feedback
Mhm.
that I was doing an excellent job. You know, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
And I mean, certainly I have recollections of being removed from the school under the false pretense of going on a religious retreat
Yeah. Oh God.
to other locations. And I would say it was a less than holy activity going on at the other locations.
Yeah.
But I think it had to do with how these programs worked, what they were looking to do with consciousness, especially that of a child. And
Yep.
you know, we learned now that you can traumatize a child and cause massive dissociation, which was something that they were attempting to do purposefully because of their efforts to wield consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was back in late 70s, early 80s. Is that
This would have been early 80s.
okay? Yeah. Um, Anything else you can tell us about all of that? Did it extend beyond the remote viewing practices? And you're I hear you
Uh,
talking about going on field trips, where
mhm,
I feel, you know, when you said that, I had this wash of like stuff coming through me psychically that is pretty painful. Um,
mhm.
yeah, that I can
Well,
feel. Yeah.
I will give you a heads up if I haven't ever clarified this before, but I have worked with energy workers before, and one of which, um, who was amazing, she had always told me, she said, if you're ever working with anybody else that could read energy, she says, you need to warn them. She
Mhm.
says, you have a lot of harsh stuff in you.
Yeah, I
So
can, yeah, it's
be forewarned.
yeah, it's actually coming up through the heart chakra and it's making me cry.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
it's a potentized sort of
yeah,
leftover remains, and it's not just yours,
yeah,
it's for everybody who was there. So
yeah.
I can feel that. And as far as you know, you have memory of like high school, you went on, did you go on to Catholic high or were
I
you
did go to a Catholic high school as well.
uh-huh, okay.
Mhm.
Um Do you feel like you were taken into the SSP?
I do. I actually suspect that might have been what happened during my
Mm.
peculiar time in the submarine service. I did exceptionally well getting into the Navy. I did exceptionally well in boot camp. I did exceptionally well in basic enlisted submarine school to the point where I believe that might have got me on the radar of some more advanced programs.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been the opportunity that the Raytheon personnel took at the
Mhm.
time, and in introducing me to that chair. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't recall exactly what happened in there at all, which is super peculiar.
Mhm.
And then in distancing myself from the submarine service, I'm sure you can have an appreciation for memory banks being messed with.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm at a loss for words right now. This when screen memories, that's the word that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
When they place a memory in your head to cover for something else.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
This one actually really makes me laugh. Never in my life have I had any difficulty in learning or absorbing information. I'm not a knucklehead.
I know this about you, Eric.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not a knucklehead. I can learn, okay? Um, but my memory, like it is so weird because this is my memory in my head, and I have to deal with the fact that I know it's not accurate. My memory for my separation from the submarine service is that I had an inability to learn the information.
Yeah.
So it's that it doesn't make any sense. It's the shortest window in my life with so many peculiarities. But my standing memory banks as they are right now, I do not believe there was a time in my life where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, after testing high enough to get into a program,
Right. It's
after
just like
excelling in
Eric's
every
now a
stage,
dunce. You're a dunce.
yeah,
That's it. That's all.
yeah,
End
yeah.
of.
All of a sudden,
Right.
I hit this. All of a sudden, June of 1994, I could no longer learn,
Right. Right.
and then I got out, and then all of a sudden I can learn again.
Right. So there's, yeah, and yeah, there's so much here. And have you spent time writing out all the peculiarities down in form?
No, that's one of the issues that I still harbor that I cannot seem to overcome. I have an inability to write this stuff down.
Okay.
There's so much stuff that's happened in my life that I wish
Yeah.
I could organize it. And that's kind of why I went online and started doing the videos and stuff because um, I
Yeah.
I I believe what I believe whenever I was programmed to have an inability to write things down was so far back that they never anticipated the video aspect of reality coming into play. So
Mhm.
I'm governed in as so far as not having the ability to write things down. But I can talk, I can do
Yeah.
videos, and that is not painful to me. Writing is like it drives me insane if I try to write down what's going on. Like I start losing my mind.
You mean even if you're just writing about what happened yesterday?
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost. Like if I try
Okay.
to journal, yeah,
Okay.
if I try to keep track of myself on
Mhm.
paper, I start losing my mind.
Okay. Okay. This is interesting. Well, the reason why I said that is if you want more information to come through from the subconscious, start writing it down.
Mhm.
But obviously, if
Yeah,
schism here.
everyone tells me that. Yeah,
There's
everyone
a
tells me that, and every time I go in that direction, it makes my skin crawl. It makes me feel crazy. It makes me
okay.
feel nauseous. Yeah, it's
Yep.
just
Yeah.
it doesn't
And
work for
that's
me.
proof positive that we're speaking truth here. Yeah. There would be no reaction if there wasn't something there to investigate and to
Mhm,
tabulate and make meaning from.
mhm.
Thank you
Yeah, and
so
it
much
drives
for
me
sharing.
nuts actually that everyone makes it sound like it's so easy.
It's not. Well, you know how Tony always says, write down your timeline, write down your timeline. And I'm
Mhm.
like, Tony, mine's like,
Uh-huh.
it's not linear. I mean, it's like ah,
Mhm.
this is a big rat's nest. So maybe we'll come back to that. But the point for again that I wanted to make here was like this, the element of weirdness goes back through the life of Eric Hecker as far back as we
Mhm.
can trace. Not yet written
Mhm.
down formally, but we're giving voice and making meaning of it here through documentation and video. I guess we could set this aside just momentarily.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing about that. I think
You're
those
welcome.
those parts that are very intimate to our own life experience get different when, it's not always, those are not always easy things to talk about. They're connected to trauma of the mind, of the body, et cetera,
Mhm.
like point blank, period, full stop.
Mhm.
They are. So thank you for going there with me. We can fast forward a little bit to more recent times, yet still 14 years behind. A little echo there. 2010, you are spirited off to Antarctica. However, this was I believe you officially applied. Can you confirm?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
I officially applied to the program, and honestly, I mean, um, it was the only company in the world. I was, the economy had tanked for, 2008, 9, 10. I was trying to recover from, the wonderful Obama administration, and I couldn't find a job anywhere. So yes, I applied. But with that being said, that was the only person that I applied to a lot of places, but that was the only place that responded and was going to cut me a check. So, in almost every sense of the word, it wasn't really a choice. I
Yeah.
didn't really have another option. I was going to the
Again,
South
the
Pole
mark of the
Station.
soul's hand inside of the journey.
Yes, yeah, there was something going on. I was completely begrudgingly going to the South Pole Station.
Yeah.
I would have taken anything else if it was available. I did not want to go there. I was not excited about it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was being hired by Raytheon, who I still knew from
Right.
1994.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing
Right.
good about what was going to happen. It was just, I was doing what had to be done.
Yeah, there's some very interesting crossover with Raytheon popping up again. So point being that, it's not like I know there's something weird going on down at South Pole and I'm going to go check it out. More like I'm a professional plumber. I've worked high-end gigs all over the place with wealthy people on Long Island, and I know there's stuff going on in the deep state. I'm already tipped to this, and I'm gonna,
Mhm.
you're showing up as a how do we say, a master craftsperson in a way with the
Yeah,
plumbing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, a lot of people, in many realms that I work, a lot of people are shocked that I'm where I'm at and what I'm doing. And to be completely honest, it's because I have a killer resume for what I do. Like I'm very good with my hands and the trade skills, and some people may laugh at that, but when it comes down to providing these skills in the harshest of conditions, like South Pole Station, Antarctica in the winter, like yeah, that's something I can totally kick ass at.
Yeah.
If they had a
Well,
space station on the moon, I could go be a plumber there, and I would
yeah.
excel at it. Like
Yeah.
I'm at that level in my trade. Been doing this for 30 years. I'm really good at it.
Yeah, I get that. And I think it does make me think of like the off-world environment, the pole, and now North Slope of Alaska. I know you've also been working up there and out on ice fields and all over the place running equipment, that does take a special skill set to bring projects to completion. So, you go to Antarctica and you're not having a clue about what you're going to find down there, but what you've spoken about and what I watched your interview, the talk you gave for the DC Disclosure 2.0 event last year. I think was it last May? And this is
June 23.
June 23, 2023, that is. And it's what we the words that stand out are the world's largest directed energy weapon is like emblazoned across my inner
Mhm.
landscape of the mind. So can you tell us a little bit about the ice cube neutrino detector is synonymous with this? This is the energy weapon in question, correct? Or that we're
One
speaking
of
about?
one of three, but yes, we can certainly speak on that one.
Let's speak on that one,
Yeah.
and you can tell me if I have this right. I mean, neutrinos are really small particles that really are sort of ghost particles or massless in a way for all
Mhm.
intents and purposes. But yet,
Mhm.
when passed through ice, do they emit light? Is that accurate?
When the neutrino impacts the nucleus of one of the water particles, which is ice down there,
Hmm.
a reaction occurs. The neutrino and the nucleus are destroyed, and a muon is, I guess you would say, created and or ejected as well as a blue flash of light known as Cherenkov radiation. And it
Hmm.
is the blue light that the DOMs, which are embedded in the ice, are, I guess you would say, passively observing the activity of. And
Hmm.
that's how the system works as presented for its primary role as a scientific instrument.
Hmm. As a massive telescope, I believe,
Correct.
right?
World's largest telescope. And just for clarification, just so you know, it can consider this, and the rest of the world can consider it. That facility is slated to be increased in size tenfold.
Hmm.
So it's
Wow. Wow,
already the
tenfold.
biggest.
So
And
it's already
yes,
massive. It's already
it's
massive.
already the biggest
Yeah.
one, and they want to make it 10 times bigger.
So, so this is a little scary. And so we got to get to the story about how you figured out there was weirdness, high strange going on with this, something a little more peculiar, right?
Sure. I mean, basically, I was a sponge for information while I was on site. I did become aware that things were not as presented, but in regards to this system, it was years later that myself and former crew members were starting to realize that we were negatively impacted medically,
Yeah.
and we all started to, I guess you would say, rally up and try to figure out what was going on. In that process, um, I would just say a bunch of folks were putting more of their cards on the table.
Yeah.
And through those communications, I guess, I think they use the term getting read in. So folks kind of informed me to what was actually going on during our time there.
Mhm.
And I guess cast in that light, it made everything way more clear looking backwards to what was going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we're
Um,
in a high stakes situation, and your year and a year at the pole is pretty high stakes situation. I mean,
oh, yeah,
very much. I
absolutely.
mean, we can just get, I'm thinking in my situations, very weird situations where we just become dissociated and we're kind of just in it, surviving day to day. Like follow orders, do
Absolutely.
what you need to, put out fires, real or
Yep.
otherwise,
Yeah.
and metaphorical, and do your job, show up, do your job, be done. And so,
Mhm.
of course, until you, it's not till you leave and kind of come back to yourself, you go, what the fuck was that? Um,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, because it was, yeah, it was, I mean, yes, absolutely. While present at the South Pole for the year, I mean, I can't begin to emphasize how much it felt like 10 years or forever.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
but we got involved with what they simply call coping strategies.
100%.
It's
Yes.
just, it's just,
Yeah.
it's just coping strategies.
Yeah.
You get into a zone where, I mean, almost nothing matters. I mean, we were so sensory deprived from, like, the world as people know it, with all this information streams and things like that. I mean, I don't even know how to begin to tell you what it was like. There was none of that. There was no television. There's no like, it was just, you're
Yeah.
just cut off. You have a job to do. You have a
Yeah.
meal to eat. You
Yeah.
have bed to go. Like, it was just, there was nothing. We were
Yeah.
so cut off from the world that just getting getting by was almost challenging.
It
Like,
is.
it's just,
Well, if you add
yeah.
the environment of extreme cold and extreme darkness, it's
Hmm.
it's psychologically hard. You kind of want to numb
Hmm.
out.
Yeah.
You
When I
kind of,
got to about the 6 month mark, I
yeah.
mean, I'll be honest, I was having great difficulty recalling memories from
Yeah.
before being there.
The rest of your life. Like, what
Yeah,
do
I
you,
started
yeah.
to feel like I feel like I've been here forever. Like, I'm
Yeah.
having trouble remembering not being here. Like,
Yeah.
it seems like this is all there ever was.
Hmm.
And then doing the math in my head, like, oh, well, if I've been here 6 months and that feels like forever, and I have 6 months to go, well, I guess I just have forever left here.
Right. It's sort of time warp, the time space. It's like you could be on the moon, you could be on another planet. They told
Mhm.
you that you were landing in Antarctica. Do you know that you're like, do you know where you are?
John Warner teases me about that all the
Do you
time, all the
know?
time. He goes, you still think you're on the South Pole?
Right. You're still buying that one, huh?
Yeah,
So
yeah. He goes, they told you went to the South Pole. You still believe them?
so so you're there for a while and you had to do some maintenance work on the neutrino detector. Is that correct? Is that
Absolutely, yeah.
okay?
Every single day, for the most
Mhm.
part. I mean, here and there, some other person would pick up the responsibility, but typically, it was my job every day to go out to the Ice Cube Neutrino Detector as part of what we just simply called rounds, doing the rounds.
Yeah.
You know, we checked every room in every building every single day as a team. It
Hmm.
was just for the most part the Ice Cube lab was on my to-do list. I was the youngest person on the maintenance crew by far. So basically, I took all of the outside buildings almost every single day. I would go outside in the winter conditions, you know, walking to a variety of buildings,
Yeah.
some of them up to 3/4 of a mile away from the facility, which the Ice Cube Neutrino, the Ice Cube lab, I should say, was one of the furthest treks that I would have to do. And it was, you know, simply, you know, go out there, make sure the doors are closed, make sure that the lights are on, uh, you know, make sure everything's operational, you know, nothing leaking. We was, you know, nothing leaking, squeaking, squeaking,
Yeah.
smoking, you know.
That's the
And
brain.
then specific to the Ice Cube lab, there was a louvered air inlet that had chicken wire covering the inlet, and that would have a tendency to get iced up. So we would have to go out every day and knock the ice off. Otherwise, the louvers would freeze up. And then from the massive amounts of computer processing power inside the Ice Cube lab, the way that that place would cool down was simply a thermostat that would actuate the louvers to open up to let the cold air in from outside to keep the equipment from overheating. So that was, you know, the big
Yeah.
deal to go to the Ice Cube lab and check the louvers.
Right. Right. And so, what did you observe? Did you observe any weirdness, or does it, I have this like feeling of like an emanating, like a light emanating from this ice lab, like, is there
Well,
anything going on
yeah, well,
there?
that absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, observable to the eye. I have never seen so many computer server towers in my life, and I've been in some pretty savage computer laboratories. So this was really
Mm,
noticeable to me that there's a freakish amount of, you know, I guess computing or calculating going on, especially when you have to consider that it's so much going on that it would overheat the space if not for the temperatures of the South Pole winter being allowed in.
yeah.
You know, like there's something to be said for that. Um, but in regards to your feeling of the energy, I'll just bring it right to, you know, that I would
Yeah.
say you're astute, because what I wound up learning was that the detector is not simply passively observing, it has the ability to transmit. So it's not simply the world's largest telescope, it's also the world's largest phased array transmitter, because I have produced for the world publicly first, but then I did provide this information to both the Senate Intelligence Committee and ARROW when I went to testify in their skiffs in Washington, D.C. I showed them the documentation that proves that each of the 5,160 DOMs that are embedded in the ice have the capacity to transmit, which is now not passive, it's active.
Right.
They can
Yeah.
transmit at up to 2,047 volts each. So this is a savagely powerful phased array transmitter that's about to be made 10 times bigger.
10 times bigger. So, and what's your sense? What is your feeling? Like, lay this out for us. What's happening to humanity as a result?
Uh,
Yeah.
I believe first and foremost, it's the umbrella term that everybody needs to start understanding is directed energy weapons.
Hmm.
That they're extremely complex, they're multifaceted, manifold, however you want to describe it. When it comes to this system in particular, it generates earthquakes. The term that people should be looking up, because there's tons of information available on it, is simply inducing earthquakes or earthquake induction,
Hmm.
that it can be done. So lots of times, like as an example, you know, if you go on the internet and you look up chemtrails, you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff that, oh, this bogus, it's unreal, blah, blah. But if you
Hmm.
switch the term and you look up stratospheric aerosol injection, you'll come across all the science of what's going on in our skies.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
similar to, you know, direct energy weapons and things like that, you aren't necessarily going to find tons of truth, but if you start to search um, earthquake induction, you'll
Hmm.
find tons of science that supports that this is possible. One of the things that has been interesting since I've, come into the disclosure circles is certainly I still have friends in the program, let's just say, but they pay attention to what I'm doing and my efforts, and they try to assist me with getting this information out because it's not all mine. I'm kind of on point for my crew because nobody else wants to go public. But what they're basically supporting me behind the scenes with and trying to get me to figure out how to make more public is that it's actually extremely easy to induce earthquakes. And they want me to harp on that to the public that, we just have to appreciate that, similar to like when Nikola Tesla, presented electricity to the world, right? Almost immediately, everybody had access to electricity and could use it. But does that mean that they could understand it and explain it?
Mm. Right. Like,
So I
yeah,
feel
we
like
don't know
that's
how
where
it
we are
works,
right now.
but
Right.
mhm.
So nobody really needs to know or understand how earthquake induction works. They just need to appreciate that there are those that do and are doing it.
Right. Clarification, when you said I have friends in the programs, I don't think you mean SSP, although you might, but I think you're meaning Antarctica program who are still
I
active.
meant I meant in, I meant in the Antarctic program, correct?
Okay, just clarifying that. And
Yep.
then
Yep.
is this the ice cube detector uh military, is this military based? Is this owned by the military? Is this a consortium of international interests, or how would you call that?
Technically, the South Pole Station is the Adamson Scott International South Pole Station.
Hmm.
The NSF, National Science Foundation, like in an official sense, runs it.
Hmm.
The University of Wisconsin-Madison is the academic arm that's supposed to be in charge of the detector. But with all that being said, when I went and testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee and Arrow, after giving all of my information, conversation rapidly turned to us all um, appreciating that there are apparently rogue agencies that are operating outside of the oversight of the
Yeah,
US Congress and therefore the
yeah.
American people, to the point that that question can't be answered. And that is the problem,
Yes,
is that
because you
these
can't put, no, but
technologies.
it's the same with the SSP, like who's actually
Yeah,
running the show? Well, you can't point a
right.
finger at anybody because it's all like, you know,
Yeah, and that was one of the terms that I learned in the submarine service was plausible deniability and compartmentalization of information.
yeah.
And they are very, very powerful tools in the toolkits of these rogue agencies because things have just gotten so secret and so separated from any oversight that, like lots of times people say, well, what do you think they're doing with it? And my answer is whatever they want to,
Hmm.
because we have no idea who they are and they're operating without any regulation or oversight. They have the ability to do whatever they want to. So we have to appreciate that when we start looking at all of the possibilities for which these technologies can be used, we
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
suspect that every one of them is being used until we can get control of the situation, which we seem to lack.
yeah. And so we're talking about what's ostensibly on the surface scientific study and, you know, a huge telescope
Mhm.
studying space, right? But then we're talking about producing earthquakes. Now, what about controlling the human mind?
Oh, I think that's, yeah. I think when we start getting into directed energy weapons and frequencies,
Yeah.
um, and the fact that this is the largest transmitter for such activities, I, I I put that right on the table of possibility as well.
Mhm.
I think what we just went through with the whole COVID debacle
Mhm.
gives me great concern because I don't know ever in a time of the history of the world where you can show me any precedent where people pretty much almost all agreed on something at once. So to me, there was
Mm.
investment through technology and applied intention to bring all of these people onto the same page, and these types of technologies afford that possibility.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh God. This, yeah, this is such a deep, complicated, complex web. And would you say
Mhm.
also that there's a relay of correspondence between the ice detector, the neutrino ice cube detector, with other stations around the planet, or what do you
I
what's
would, because that's also available in a minimum amount of research, that these technologies are, let's just say, um, multifaceted in their own capacities to begin with. And then when you start to, I guess you would say, almost like cogs in a machine, if you want to say that we're going to take this one and connect it to that one, then things just increase exponentially to what they can do possibly.
Mhm. Um, thank you for that. I appreciate all your clarifications on so many points here. I'm also curious on a personal level, or with you or others you were working with, can you talk any about what you were experiencing on a physical, biological level in the corpus? What health effects
What,
of this?
what I will put out there is information that is already public, because I don't want,
Mhm,
how do I
mhm,
put it?
mhm,
I believe all of these individuals are targeted. So if I put out too much information, it's
mhm.
almost like letting your enemy know where on the target they're hitting.
Mhm. Well, but for
So,
you, could you speak to anything that you had going on anomalously? You know?
well, what I will put out there is information that's already public technically,
Mhm,
right? So
mhm,
during my winter season, which would have been summertime for the United States in 2011, and this was all over the news. Um, my actual winter site manager, a woman by the name of Renee Nicole DeSuer, again, this was all over the news. It's all public. This woman basically hired me on and had me sign all of the paperwork with the clarification coming from her that no matter what your medical conditions are, there's absolutely no way for you to be evacuated from the South Pole Station in the wintertime. She's the one that taught me that. But then there we were in the winter season at South Pole, and all of a sudden she started suffering medically and was commanding for an evac.
hmm,
And what she believed occurred, which I believe she believed it, she was under the impression she had a stroke. And I believe she got very scared that she was going to die and started demanding an evacuation, which was never going to happen. And she should have known that. But she was contacting news agencies and such, saying, Raytheon is stranded me here. They're leaving me here to die. I need help. Um, I, I mean, she went to Johns Hopkins University after she got off the ice, and they did all the testing that they could, and they confirmed, um, we don't know what happened to you, but you didn't have a stroke. But it was also only 2011, so the terms Havana syndrome and directed energy weapons weren't really in the conversation yet. And now, in
yeah.
hindsight, um, it appears that she just simply was suffering issues from either A, being in proximity to the systems that we were not being protected from and being deceived about, or B, potentially, once our systems went active, I don't doubt that there were other factions that were then working defensively against us. So there's a high probability that myself and my crew were simply caught in the crosshairs of modern warfare before the rest of the people of this planet have been exposed.
Mhm, 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 mhm. Oh, just pausing with all of this.
Go
Um,
right ahead. Yeah, it's a lot to
yeah, I know,
absorb.
it's like, oh, just let it filter down
Yeah.
through. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and Raytheon is the umbrella sort of operator of all this. Is that, I don't know that that's true. I think we kind of covered that it's a lot of different consortiums and we can't like pin it down. But I think it's
Well,
interesting.
Raytheon doesn't even have the helm anymore. Now
Okay.
it's Lockheed Martin.
Oh,
Technically, the
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it's, this is again in
Mhm.
my in
Yeah.
my life
Yeah.
experience. I'm well aware of the fact that there are many contractors on this planet
Yes, there would
that
have to
can
be
provide
yeah, because there's a massive
they can
amount of
provide the
money too.
required yeah,
Yeah.
they can provide the required logistical services for South Pole Station, um, without being a weapons manufacturer. There's a lot of companies that can provide the logistical support and don't make weapons for the military. Why do they only hire contractors for logistical support there that do make weapons?
Right.
So it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Yes. It's a damning piece of suggestive evidence. But has Ray
yeah.
this is a little bit personal. Has Raytheon ever come after you? chatting
Um,
stuff?
not in a direct fashion in so far as identifying themselves.
Yeah.
Um, but I get pestered by people all the time that I know are affiliated to some faction or another, and certainly want me to shut up. But
Mhm. Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
okay. They can suggest all they want. I have stuff to take care of, and it just is what it is. I mean, I travel a lot. I cannot begin to tell you how it's pretty much like almost every single time I'm at an airport, I get approached by someone, and they quite literally will identify. Like I had a recent engagement at LAX where the guy sitting next to me at the bar identified himself as having 5 days prior just gotten out of Navy intelligence and was getting a job with Raytheon. He doesn't know exactly what he's going to do for them yet,
Oh no.
but he took the right. I mean, so it's like, come on, like cut it out.
You're like, what's next? Hey. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Oh my God. And you talked about the South Pole being also an incoming and outgoing correspondence with potentially, galactic ships.
Mhm.
Do I read you right on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
my understanding from the research that it appears that um, technologies have been around for quite some time. What people are calling UFO activity is just actually human activity with highly advanced technology that's being monopolized by these factions. One of the side effects of the movement of these vehicles with their exotic propulsion systems appears to be that they eject neutrinos. Well, what a coincidence. We have the world's largest neutrino detector at South Pole Station. And what a lot of people may not realize with the technology there is it's omnidirectional. It's basically it can detect them coming from any direction and then triangulate. So it's my belief, it's not a large leap of logic that this detector array, besides the naturally occurring high energy neutrino activity, um, if there were to be exotically propelled vehicles, this would be a way of being like an air traffic control
Air
center
traffic
for,
control.
for such
Um,
activity,
and that could
or at
be,
least observation. I'm not maybe not maybe it's not even control. Maybe just observation, so that
mm,
again, I believe many factions have had these technologies for many years. It's not just the United States. It's not just the Army. It's all kinds of people now have this technology. So certainly, those who have the deep pockets and the motive to pay attention to such activity, it would behoove them to build such a facility and track
mm.
all of the actions of A, their own vessels, and B, the vessels of their enemies. I mean, this is why we have radar systems, is to track our own planes and to track our enemies' planes. Well, if we have technology that's far more advanced than planes and radar is dysfunctional, it would sure be nice if we had a technology that afforded the same benefit.
Something's coming in psychically, which is pretty interesting right now. And it's like to
Mhm.
detect light forces and keeping them at bay from our planetary system. Um, yeah, I don't know. Could that be a thing? Air
It
traffic
could be.
control. I mean, that could be a lot of things, whether it's
Mhm.
human-made exotic craft, using alternative energy systems, right? Or ET ships and this, that, and the other. It could be a lot of things. I mean, I think you saw some ET craft while you were there, right? Did you
I,
see?
I did see a UFO by definition of not knowing what the hell it was that I saw, um, but it was this massive fireball that went from horizon to horizon in what seemed to be like a fraction of a second or a second, and we're talking super distance traversed by this thing so quickly, and that it was I guess you'd say like a pin straight parallel line to the horizon. It's not like it was coming up from high and then moving across the sky and down like a falling meteor or something.
Mhm.
So in my mind's eye, looking backwards, to me that flight path screams of being a controlled flight path. Um, I, I, I mean, I can't imagine that it was some sort of like near Earth object that was so big and so fast that I'm apparently the only person in the world that witnessed a catastrophic meteor event not occur. You know, so it's like it didn't hit the Earth, but it certainly seemed like it
Yeah.
was big enough and fast enough that it would have been like what they would have called, you know, one of these life-changing events on the planet. But instead, it just passed by at great speed and parallel to the surface. In my brain,
Yeah.
it makes me think of like when pilots buzz the tower.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it seems
Yeah.
like that's what I
Yeah.
witnessed. It
Yeah.
was this crazy fast ship that was ripping past air traffic control.
Like, ha ha, here we are. God, there's so much here, and we go back into, Hitler's in the underground ice and the, oh God, the outcome of
Mhm.
World War II and all this stuff with, I mean, we could go on and on for a long time. One burning
Well,
thing I
since
wanted to ask you
go
was,
ahead, go ahead.
you mentioned in your DC talk about the cryo lab, and it just made me go, and I don't think this is what your reference was, but like me and my audience are tracked in a certain way. So we're like hybrids, ETs, cyborgs, what else? But I think you meant probably ice core samples, or what was going on in that
Cryo,
in the ice lab
cryo,
itself, the cryo lab.
the cryo, what we called the cryo building, was
Yes, that maybe was what
basically
I'm
a
thinking. Yeah.
massive storage system for chilled helium,
Okay.
and it was chilled down to about 4 degrees Kelvin.
Wow.
And then when they would withdraw it from the huge tanks, they would put it in an urn and bring it over to the science facilities, and then drop it down to a quarter of degree Kelvin, which is almost, zero and no molecular motion. Um, Funny about that was I was recently at the airport and had another gentleman come and sit next to me,
And
and
in there.
he he identified himself as being a former United States Antarctic Program participant. And yes,
Like
so,
for real.
for real. Like, so this is, yeah, it's hilarious. And I was with a friend of mine who I had already told, oh, whenever I go to the airport, I have these weird conversations with people that show up and sit next to me and either dig for info or give me info. So she was sitting on one side of me when all of a sudden this gentleman goes, "Oh, look at your tattoo. That's nice." And he shows me he's got a matching Antarctica tattoo. So we proceed to have a conversation. And in that conversation, he communicated to me that the helium, as I just communicated to you, he said a portion of that massive amount of helium was H3, and that he also found it really peculiar that we had so much of it because the project that he was working on, he stated, was the only one really using it, and they used so little of it. So we both agreed that it seemed very weird to have so much of it. But now looking big picture, right? I'm discovering systems that take copious amounts of power to run. I'm familiar with the power supply system at the South Pole Station, and I suggest that it's nowhere near sufficient for the power demands of the projects that are being run alternatively. And then next thing you know, I'm sitting next to a gentleman. He starts talking to me about H3, which would basically be a high-end fuel supply for very special power supply systems that could use H3. I mean, I literally just found this out on the last 3 weeks that I was traveling, is that there was a copious amount of H3, a special helium, a
And
fuel
are
by
you,
definition.
I was going to say, well, that could be used for exotic propulsion systems, correct?
Right.
Is
Yeah.
that what we're
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
whether you want to call it propulsion or power plant, it's
Hmm.
almost, it's almost six of one, half a dozen of another at that point.
Oh, okay. How is it ostensibly, was the pole supplied by like dirty fuel just like the rest of the world, or
It's fossil fuels. They have the fuel that
yeah.
they advertise utilizing is called AN8, Antarctic grade version of JP8, which is a military grade jet fuel. It is very dangerous stuff. It is 100% volatile, which means it cannot evaporate any faster. And that's under normal conditions. At the South Pole Station, where we're at 0% humidity, I guess you would say the latent rate of evaporation is expedited.
Hmm.
So the AN8 is very dangerous stuff, and we even had a savagely large spill one day that
Hmm. Hmm.
you know we mitigated the problem. I got a very special pat on the back and a certificate of appreciation. And it probably sounds silly to regular people, but in the program, um, I was twice awarded what they called basically station saver status. There were two
Hmm.
times where I was, given accommodation for basically like saving the day, and the fuel spill was one of them. We we
Hmm.
had we had a fuel leak, a massive AN8 fuel leak that occurred in a very active mechanical space, and the fact that it did not ignite and take the facility out, like still to this day, I can't believe it didn't blow up, but it
Hmm.
didn't blow up, and I played probably a very major role in preventing it from blowing up.
Hmm. Did you use psychic abilities?
I, I don't I see it's hard to define it, but I will say that when things go wrong, okay, I know I change. It's like a switch flips.
Hmm.
Um, from my perspective, it's almost like being like in the Matrix. Like um, the whole world slows down from my perspective,
Hmm.
and I proceed to I the way I'm just going to use the words that I use. The way that I perceive this is that it's like computer processing, right? When all of a sudden you flood a computer with too much information, it has to process it all. So speed slows down. So I
Hmm.
feel like when things go wrong, my senses start allowing in more information. So it's like the processing speed slows down. So
Yeah.
observationally, from
Yeah.
my perspective,
Yeah.
the world literally slows down to a fraction of the speed of where it was.
Hmm.
And it's my perspective that in this beneficial rate of time, I'm afforded so much time that I can't really make a wrong decision.
I see what you're saying.
It would
Yeah.
be like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it would be like
Yeah.
if you all of a sudden were standing in front of me, but you tried to punch me in the face. But if you're going so slowly that it's
Right. You
going to
have
take
time
you
to
like
think about what
10
to
minutes,
do. Yeah.
yeah, with
Yeah.
great ease, you're never going to hit me,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know? So it was one of those moments where things went down, is how I guess I would say. Like once shit starts going down, all of a sudden I change, the environment changes, and I just start doing
Yeah.
um, with the knowledge that I can't fail now. Like I'm being
Hmm.
afforded all the time in the world to
Hmm.
make the right decision.
Yeah.
So I just simply do.
Yeah. And I think our higher mind can higher self, if you like, can really come into play during that time, and we can also access higher help, and all these things are
Mhm.
going on in a sort of time
Yeah.
dilated space. So that's
Yeah. As
something.
and as an
Yeah.
example to this moment, like I did what I had to do. Like I remember once the fuel started shooting all over the place, I went through the motions. I called in the emergency response teams. I called the facilities manager. I mean, I was 10 feet from my fire gear locker, but I had the wherewithal to realize like I don't even with the time saved, right? I still didn't have time to put my firefighting gear on because I had to start working as a tradesman faster than I could afford
Yeah.
myself the time to gear up as a firefighter. I had to start attacking the trade problem, and I did, which required me to dive into a crawl space, a mechanical crawl space that it was very loaded with equipment and tight spaces, corners, sharp edges, you name it. I mitigated the problem. And then when all was said and done, the facilities engineer came to me, and he's, a tiny stature person, right? Mountain climber, all that type of stuff. And he looked at me after the event was mitigated. He looked at me and he goes, I don't understand. He goes, I saw you dive headfirst into that floor and start maneuvering through that. He's like, how did you do that?
Well done, Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty, you can be really on your toes in these situations where, if you've been in countless anomalous things, situations going on before, you kind of know what to do.
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
the majesty of our humanity and also our higher elements, I think, all coming to
mhm,
play in a very alchemical way. So one more
mhm,
thing here.
mhm.
I want to go back to the Antarctica, or excuse me, the Alaska
Sure.
Triangle. The Alaska
Okay.
Triangle thing. I know you were on the show. Was it called? What was the show called? Is it called Alaska Triangle, or was
The
it?
the
Was it
TV the
called?
TV series is absolutely called the Alaska Triangle. I
Okay.
was in season 2, episode 9. I believe they call it The Mysteries of Ketchikan, Alaska.
Okay, this was down in Ketchikan. All right,
Yeah,
rainy
yeah, beautiful,
Ketchikan.
beautiful town. Yep, beautiful town.
Yeah.
This is what gets me mad about disclosure, because this is again also my experience that I'm trying to share with the world. Disclosure's messed up. I was contacted by this production crew to go to Ketchikan, Alaska, to utilize my skill sets to locate and find the massive amounts of reported USOs, unidentified submerged objects.
Hmm.
That was the mission.
Hmm.
Went out there with a camera crew, a boat captain, and the gear that we needed to do this. They, were obviously running cameras, recording stuff, right? I was certainly out there. It's like fishing, right? You throw the line in the water. Did you find a fish yet? No, not yet. But you keep moving around, and the goal is to find a fish. So effectively, they were recording me going from place to place, and I would say, okay, I'm not finding anything here. Okay, I'm not finding anything there. And we did that a bunch of times until eventually I caught the fish. I got the recording of everything that they were looking for. I found the USO
Right.
location. We recorded everything. Everybody was congratulatory, hip hip hooray. Myself, even knowing how things get weird, like I made sure that everything was being worded correctly as I was recording. I got the captain to state what was going on. I got the cameraman I got everybody present to communicate that we had success. They had all kinds of recording of this. They edited every single bit of that out from the show that went on air. And they produced a show that basically looked like they sent me out there and I couldn't find
Find
anything.
anything. They make you look like a nutcase. So,
Yeah.
so right. So, and
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to clarify, people who maybe
Mm.
aren't familiar so much with Alaska, what's the Alaska Triangle? It's between uh Juneau and let's see, it's Barrow,
I think it's Yeah, I think
Anchorage,
it's Juneau to
and
Barrow and Anchorage.
Juneau.
It's huge. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
huge.
and it's a place where a lot of people, particularly planes have gone down and
Mhm.
people have disappeared. Alaska has more disappeared people than any other state in the union, never to be
Yep.
heard from again. And so, and also, again, the Mount Hayes anomaly, purported ET base underground, or was at one time.
Mhm.
Anyway, just a soundbite on the Alaska Triangle, aka, akin to the Bermuda
Mhm.
Triangle. So it's a play on that. But what did you find? What could you tell what you were looking at under the water
We
there?
were we were looking for acoustic anomalies.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, in the beginning, I was finding standard noises that should be heard under the water.
Mhm.
Nothing spectacular. But then eventually, we got a solid hit. And this is stuff I learned from being in the submarine service. You look for patterns, repetition, mechanical sounds, and that's what I found. A very solid, distinct, like I don't know, like a. Can you hear that?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was incessant, this
Mm.
completely clear, non-stop, repetitive. So that was a hit. We found. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere in the waters of Alaska. I mean, there's no buildings, there's no nothing. I had the captain turn off all power, everything to the boat. It is dead silence in every other sense of the word. But the hydrophone that we were utilizing was picking that up clear as day. We were hitting something,
Hmm. And you're using
and no one disagreed at the time. I mean, at the time,
right.
everybody agreed that's exactly what we're looking for. Thank you.
And it's
And
you're
they
using
edited that
a
out.
kind of sonar? That's a sonar,
Yeah, we were using what you would call a hydrophone, so it's a passive
okay.
listening device for
Okay.
underwater.
Uh-huh. And so those clicks denote an object found or
they denote a sound located.
Okay.
Because it was a singular hydrophone, there was no way to get like a trajectory. We were going off a single, almost like having a single ear. But like in other, like more highly advanced stuff could have triangulated it.
Hmm.
So all we were confirming was we have the presence of something that's an
Hmm.
unidentified submerged object.
Hmm.
We couldn't triangulate a position. We just knew we were near it because of the passive capacity of the hydrophone. You know, you had to be within a certain distance of it, or you just wouldn't hear it. And now, granted, sound does travel very far and fast in the
Hmm.
water compared to the atmosphere, so that range is still probably substantial. But like I said, we were moving around for a while and finding
Hmm.
nothing. But eventually, we moved into this area where that extremely distinct sound was being heard clear as day. It required zero processing. So, like even in the television show, what they wound up doing was in the areas where I said that I wasn't hearing anything, they then took the audible sounds from those positions and sent them to a sound expert who ran them through a processor and came up with all kinds of cool stories for what I was listening to. But the sound that I captured required no processing. It was discernible to the human ear without any processing required.
Mm. Well, it makes us curious to go down to Ketchikan and see what else is happening out there. I'm
All
wondering if
right.
they ever did a show. Well, Nome, Alaska is not in the triangle, but I know there's been supposedly quite a bit of ET activity out there.
Mhm.
Anyway, the Alaska communications will continue.
Uh-huh.
Is anything else you want to, you felt like kind of not quite complete on here today? That you
Yes,
add?
yes. And I want to clarify that this is my opinion and not necessarily Rebecca's, because I don't want to corral anybody into my boat without their permission. But I know Rebecca respects that I have an opinion on things. And I just want to let everybody in the disclosure community know you need to be careful. You need to apply serious amounts of discernment. Myself, as a whistleblower, trying to get the truth out to you, the viewing audience, now for years, I am learning more and more every day that the vast majority of the people in the disclosure community are frauds. You need to be very careful. They are disseminating seeds of disinformation, misinformation, and they are muddying the waters of the truth that the good intentioned people are trying to get to you. Vote with your dollar. You know, everybody's buying videos, going to shows. Vote with your dollar. Stop supporting the con jobs that are in disclosure that are here to hurt humanity.
Hmm. Well, I would agree. There's quite a lot of misinformation and confusion in the disclosure community, as well as a lot of division and separation, as well as people who are telling the truth, who are doing a great job and bringing a lot of heart to what goes on out there. So, point well made to be discerning in all things. And do you have any further appearances coming up locally, Eric? Or I know you were in Australia for something recently, as was I. Different reasons we were there, but. Do you have anything coming up in the US where you will be speaking?
I do not have any public engagements scheduled. I've been working kind of behind the scenes with documentary folks
Yeah,
and
yeah.
private conversations, because there are activities from people that are trying to get the truth out there, but they're trying to figure out a way to get the truth out without getting caught in the net of the disinformationists.
Right.
So
So, yeah. Well,
yeah, I
people
don't
can.
have anything public.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we will, and we are doing our own thing
Yes.
as well. So,
Yep.
but people can. You have a wealth of information on deciphering.tv, which is your own website. Um,
Yes, absolutely.
and is it true people is this your email, eric@deciphering.tv, or is that if people want to get a hold of you?
The best way to the best way for them to contact me would be through the website at deciphering.tv. I
Mhm.
just revamped the entire website. Yes, it's mine. There is no censorship. I'm trying to get the truth out to the best of my ability. I absolutely just revamped the website because I am inundated with attacks constantly. So, you know, basically I have it set up now where, you know, there's a lot of content on there available for free. the documentation, the archives, the proof available for free. A vast majority amount of the videos available for free. There are subscription levels. If people opt to show support in my direction, I'd appreciate it, because technically the website's not free. Me traveling to Australia is not free. Me trying to get the
Yeah,
truth
so
out
they
to the
can really
masses is
support,
not
yeah,
free.
yeah. So
You
they
know,
can
so I'm
support
just
you
trying.
by subscribing to your,
Absolutely.
paid
Yeah.
version of your site and get all the
Absolutely. Like,
information.
so as an example, when I just went to Australia, right? That cost me thousands of dollars to go speak to people in Australia. I put up 2 videos from that event so far, and I've now offered them to some of the higher subscription levels where it's included for free for subscription, or for a 2-hour video, the whopping fee of $5. So it's like,
Awesome. Well,
so,
it's good
yeah.
people can support you that way, Eric, and you're doing
Mhm.
great work in the world. So I'll send people down to your, this description box below. You can find his more contact information, more about Eric. And if anybody's looking to book a reading, a coaching session, healing, and so on with me, they can do that as well in the description box below. And my Awakening course is beginning August 19th, live with me for 10 full weeks. We still have some spots available in that course. I'm excited to be actually teaching for the first time live. So Eric, thank you so much. You're a powerhouse of passion. And I love that about you. So many more questions for you. Maybe we'll have to have you back on a second time. And
You got it.
signing off today, Eric and Rebecca here on Sirius Blue. Bye for now.